All right, let's jump right in. When you think about the Viking Age in England, it feels kind of familiar, right? We all have these images of long ships and bearded warriors. But how do we actually get inside the heads of the people who lived it? How do we understand what they feared, what they hoped for? Well, that's exactly what we're going to tackle. So, think about it. How do you truly understand a world that's just gone? A world with a totally different set of beliefs, different nightmares, and a completely different idea of what makes someone a hero. Well, the answer is surprisingly simple, really. You listen. You listen to the stories that world left behind. And lucky for us, the Anglo-Saxons left behind three very, very different kinds of stories that, when you put them together, give us this incredible three-dimensional view of their world. Okay, so our first window. This one opens up onto the heroic ideal of the age. We're looking at Beowulf. You've probably heard of it. It's this epic poem that was basically the cultural blueprint for what it meant to be noble, to be brave, to be a good person in that world. And just listen to this language. The poem paints this absolutely terrifying picture. Grendel came walking, wearing God's anger. From his eyes there shot a light, uncanny, flame-like. Whoa. This isn't just some simple adventure story. It's a horror story. You can literally feel the dread of this monstrous supernatural evil. And did you catch that phrase, wearing God's anger? That's our first big clue that something really complex is going on here. And this is the soul of the poem, right here. It's like this constant tug of war. On one hand, it's celebrating all these classic old-school Germanic virtues, pure courage in a fight, unbreakable loyalty to your leader, and the generosity you'd expect from a great king. But the whole thing is wrapped in a Christian worldview. The poet, almost certainly a monk, calls God the creator, and even makes the monster Grendel a direct descendant of the biblical Cain. So the poem is constantly wrestling with this question. How do these two worlds, these two sets of values, fit together? Okay, so let's close that window on the mythic world of heroes for a second and open a new one. And this one looks out onto something much harsher, the brutal day-to-day reality. This is the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which is the closest thing they had to a year-by-year news report, and it was a record of absolute crisis. And the early entries are just breathtaking. Get this one from the year of the very first major Viking raid. The writer doesn't just say some raiders showed up. No, they see immense sheets of light, whirlwinds, and fiery dragons flying across the firmament. For them, the Viking attacks weren't just a military problem. It was a sign from God. It was the apocalypse happening right before their eyes. But now, let's fast forward less than 100 years. The crisis is at its absolute worst. And the tone? It has completely changed. Listen. Quote, the Danish army stole out to Chippenham and drove many of the people oversea, all but Alfred the king. No more fiery dragons, right? It's just stark, it's blunt, and it's terrifying because of how simple it is. The kingdom is collapsed, the king is on the run. The language is stripped down to the bone, and that reflects just how grim things had become. So, we've seen the ideal hero they dreamed of, and we've seen the harsh reality they were living in. Our third and final window shows us the man caught right in the middle of it all, King Alfred. And we get to see him through the personal, almost intimate eyes of his own biographer, a monk named Asser. And this quote gives us such an amazing insight into Alfred the man. Asser tells us that even as a little kid, Alfred absolutely loved hearing the old Saxon poems, stories just like Beowulf, and he memorized them. But he sorrowed greatly because he couldn't read and there was nobody around to teach him. This tells you he wasn't just another warrior king. This was a deep thinker, an intellectual, a guy who was just hungry for knowledge and wisdom. And you can see what Asser's doing here. He's painting this portrait of the absolute ideal Christian king. It's almost like he's going down a checklist of all those heroic virtues from the poems. He's zealous, he's bountiful, he's friendly, he's curious. Asser is essentially describing a real-life Beowulf, but one who is also a devout Christian. He's the hero that the culture had been dreaming of, finally made real. So now let's put it all together. We have these three totally different windows, right? Each one showing us a different slice of the same world. How do they combine to give us the full picture? And here is where it all just clicks into place. You've got Beowulf, the epic poem, giving us that mythic, heroic voice. It shows us what they valued, their cultural ideals. Then you have the Chronicle with its terse, factual voice, hitting us with the harsh reality of invasion and collapse. And finally, you have Osser's Life with its personal, admiring voice, showing us that ideal leader trying to make it all work in the real world. And here's the key takeaway. A leader like Alfred doesn't just pop out of nowhere. He was a product of a culture that held up Beowulf as its greatest hero, and his character was forged in the fires of the crisis that the Chronicle recorded. In a way, the stories created the very man who would save his people. And that brings us to one last thought. These three texts, a poem, a history, and a biography, they didn't just record an age, they helped define it, which leaves us with a really big question for our own time. If these were the stories that defined their age, what stories, right now, are going to define ours?